Yesterday I ran in what's marketed as Canada's toughest 10K race, which is the Bear Mountain 10K. And Jack, I saw you twice around that route cheering on the runners, and I think you looked at me with a bit of sympathy. You didn't recognize me, but I appreciated you being out on the course yesterday. It really did help us to fuel ourselves through those tough hills, so thank you for that. Hear, hear. The second thing I'm going to thank him for is for acknowledging that Ian went over time and apologizing for that. I'm going to apologize for me going over time. So thank you for laying that groundwork. When I got here tonight, the first thing I noticed when I walked in the ballroom was a lot of people have very funky eyeglasses. And when I don't, as you can clearly see. And when I saw my sister, who very kindly came over from Vancouver to join us tonight, she said, "You always know you're at a literary event when you have people with really funky eyeglasses." And I would suggest that in the room where Honor has the funkiest eyeglasses.
Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. So Ian talked about delirium, and there's two types of delirium. One is the delirium where you get out of it, and the other is the delirium where you don't come out of it. I am a sample of the delirium that you don't come out of. So thank you very much for coming tonight. It is really a pleasure for you to be here. This is not what I do every day for a living, and so Margot, thank you. When she emailed me, she said, "We hear you're witty, and you like reading and you like speaking." And I said, well, I like reading and speaking. I'm not sure how witty I am, but I'll give it a go. So I'm defending the book The Innocents by Michael Crummy. And I'd like to start by saying this. The Innocents is absolutely the right title for this book. It takes the reader through an incredible journey watching, listening, empathizing, and I would argue even living the lives of two very young children who face unheard tragedy and challenge. I'd like to take you back to a time in the 1800s. You live in a totally remote coastal town in Canada's Maritimes. You live with your mom, your dad, your sibling, and you've recently lost your younger sister to an illness. Your community is comprised only of you and your family. No one else is anywhere to be found. You've never left your community. Your parents have never left your community. Rather than you moving through the world seems to travel past you. It does so by the changing seasons. There are 4 full seasons in the Maritimes. It does so by the tide rising and falling, the ice flows coming and going, and the lone ship that arrives once annually to deliver your winter provisions and to remind you and your family of the debts owed by you to some benefactor. You know nothing of the outside world other than your family, that ship, and those debts. Then out of nowhere, your mom dies. You watch as your dad buries her in the bay adjoining your lonely home. Then quickly thereafter, your dad dies. You bury him. Then at ages 9 and 11, you and your sibling begin the process of growing up. Just take a moment and imagine yourself there at 9 years old. All you know in this world is your family and your total reliance for your very survival on your parents. And then they're gone. You have to learn to survive and have only your sibling, who is also just a child, to help guide, support, and learn with you. The story of The Innocents is one of young Ada and Everett, and this is their life. A great book, in my experience, is one that is emotive. It takes the reader on a compelling journey. It's a treasure trove of humanity and captivates us with story and character development. Without any hesitation, as any Canadian, and I think indeed as any of us in this room, reads this story, we will see and feel ourselves in little Ada and Everett as they grow up together. When you read this book, I think you will remember a time turning to work as a distraction from the inevitable daily stresses, as does young Ada after the death of her mom. I think you will feel the fear of Everett after he buries his dad and says to his sister, "Don't you ever leave me." I think you will experience Everett's nervousness as he learns of his father's debts. After all, who likes to see their banker's name on their call display when they're phoning? I think you will relive an angry moment when Ada was so upset with her brother that she was, quote, too furious to sleep. I know my wife is sometimes too furious to sleep. And then add to this that the story really is one that parallels the Canadian story. What comes to mind when considering Canada? Resilience, fortitude, determination, acceptance, perhaps a little naivete. These sentiments are threaded throughout the story of Ada and Everett, and indeed are threaded throughout our country's history. Now finally, let me set the stage for my participation here tonight. I'm not a fiction reader. You won't typically find me in that section in Monroe's books, although I do love Monroe's books, and if you ever want to find me, I'll probably be there. When you do find me there, I'll be in the nonfiction section, finding everything I can on politics, finance, history, and biographies. Anything on Churchill, I'll read it. Well, you might find me reading some fiction. There's one title, actually, that I saw in Monroe's recently that really got my attention, Jessica, and that is The Most Successful President in the History of Everyone and Everything by Donald J. Trump. Of course, I'm kidding. Point being that I'm not the typical reader for this type of book, and yet I found myself drawn into this story. And it's this quote from page 260 that really summarizes how it caught me. And that quote is this: "Pleasure and shame, shame and pleasure. These were the world's currencies, and it paid out both in equal measure." As many of you know, I'm an investment advisor. I ensure people's financial lives are rock solid. The professional world that I live in is based on fear and greed, yin and yang, buyers and sellers. So what I found is that even for a numbers guy like me, one who is a nonfiction reader, Michael Crummey was able to draw me to the lives of these two innocents and their pleasure and their shame. So I think that notwithstanding what Richard said, where is Richard? Richard from Frontier College. He said earlier, there he is. So Richard, you said earlier that we can't really determine yet who the winner is. I argue that we can. And I would ask everybody to pull out their ballots now and mark the next in the fourth line next to the innocents. All joking aside, I think that this book is a tremendous story. It parallels the history of Canada. I think that everybody in this room will see themselves in the book. And as I said, if it can draw a guy like me in, then it can draw all of us in. And I think that it will be the winner tonight. Thank you very much.